getting ready to head out to Parx. Driving out there, leaving a little later than I originally intended, but it is a bit snowy out there. So I kind of wanted to wait for some of the snow to clear, and I think I did a pretty good job of that. So just about ready here. It's almost 2:45 p.m. Gonna get on the road soon, and tomorrow, day one of the 2.5K Parx Big Stax 8 Max main event. I don't even know if they call it their main event, but it's the biggest tournament they run. Apparently it only gets about 150 runners, so it might be a little bit of a tougher field than kind of what I was initially expecting, but feeling good, feeling ready, and yeah, let's just get going. Alright, so the tournament's today, running a little bit later than I intended, but should be okay. Just going straight to Parx from my Airbnb. Gonna try to pick up some food there. Not sure what's around, but we'll figure it out. Get regged up and crush. So fun little tidbit. All the signs told me to go to Parx East for poker, but it turns out that for the 2.5K, it's in West. Only for the big steps, I guess. I don't know. So now I have to go drive somewhere else. Glad I'm not too late. I had a feeling this would happen, but I didn't really realize how big Parx was when I was coming up, so hopefully I can get regged on time. Let's go. Alright, I think I parked in a marginally better location, so let's go, I guess. So we've all been there. We've had, you know, stretches, runs where things go bad. Things just aren't really going our way. You know, tournaments don't work out how we think they're going to. Cash games, we're losing big hands. We're never making money with sets. We're not getting over pairs. This isn't going to be one of those kinds of sessions. So here at the Parx Big Stax 2.5K 8 Max main event, I guess. Playing here in a field that ends up being around 150 entries. I kind of didn't know what to expect going in, just because, you know, people typically when there's a field of this size, you end up with largely, you know, goodish players, a mix of players who are kind of more recreational, and then some like world beater, really crazy good pros. This was not the field, even though there were only 150 entries, and a lot of those entries were re-entries. I don't know, maybe people didn't get the memo, and a lot of pros stayed home. But anyway, ended up having a pretty good day, and you'll see in some of these hands, a lot of these hands play themselves, and a lot of them, we kind of get more value than we're probably quote-unquote supposed to. But without further ado, let's get into it. By the way, one quick announcement before we do actually dive into this. I'm going to be promoting a few things with this site I've been playing on, PKC, coming up soon. I don't have all the details yet, but they are going to be hosting a giveaway in Las Vegas. They're going to be giving away some WSOP seats. I'll have details on that soon. But if you want a head start, there's details down in the description below for signing up for PKC. But just a heads up, that's going to be awesome. So here in one of the early levels, I believe this is the second level, but it might be actually the first. Blinds are at 100, 200, 200, and we start with 100K. I've actually chipped down already to 90K. I know, so embarrassing. But this hand does us a little bit of justice back. So we go ahead and open the button with pocket eights to 700. The big blind makes it 3.5K, and I should point out right now that both my open size and the 3-bet are pretty large. But when we are so deep, I do think it's okay to call. I think that the player I'm up against is going to have a fairly transparent 3-bet range of very much value-heavy holdings. So when we do a flop a set, I expect to make quite a bit back. So I go ahead and make the call, and the flop comes the absolutely beautiful 8-7 deuce rainbow. He goes ahead and c-bets 4,000. I don't see much point in raising here. I can't think of any Well, there's a few hands I could potentially semi-bluff here, but I think it's a little bit better to keep him on the hook with ace-king. We're going to get a lot of value out of overpairs, regardless of whether we raise now or later. So I go ahead and just make the call. The turn is the 6 of spades, and he goes ahead and bets 15k now, which is, by the way, a pretty large bet. At this point, I wasn't sure if he'd really feel committed or not, but I think we need to start putting in the raise. I think the river raise is going to look even stronger than a turn raise, although it might not matter that much. I go ahead and make it 40k, and he just shoves it all in. And obviously, even though we don't technically have the nuts anymore, didn't really ever expect him to have 10-9. Very easy call with top set. And stick it in. It's 82.5k total, so I put in basically half of my stack with the raise. He has red pocket queens, so all we have to do is fade the 2 black queens that are left in the deck. And the dealer puts out the river, and it's a black paint card, but it's a king. So a little bit of a sweat there on that card, but we do double through to an absolutely insane like 180k stack, and just absolutely cruising already. So this next hand is 200, 400, 400. 175k in the stack, and John Gilliam, who is a Maryland regular, solid tournament player, and someone I've had pleasure of getting to know over the past couple of years, is at my table, and he's under the gun, makes it 1k. By the way, we are basically 5-handed for at least half the day here, so a lot of these hands are just 5-handed, so still full ante, and still just 5 or 6-handed most of the day. I'm in the small blind with ace-king offsuit. I go ahead and bump it up to 3.5k. The big blind, who is new to the table but appears to be, pretty recreational, definitely not a pro, he goes ahead and cold calls. John also calls under the gun, and the flop comes out king, jack, 10. This is a board where I feel like we could bet, but in a 3-bet pot, this is actually going to sort of smash everyone's range, not just mine. And even though I can have pocket kings when probably nobody else can, I think everyone else can have pocket jacks, everyone else can have pocket tens, everyone else can have ace queen. So I decide to check here. The big blind bets 7k, John calls, and this is quickly becoming a very weird hand. I decide to just call behind. I don't really see much merit in raising, and I don't think we can really fold just yet with a gutter to the nuts and top pair, top kicker in a 3-bet pot. So I make the call, and we go 3-way still to the turn, which is the 6 of spades. Puts a flush draw on board, and when I check, the big blind now bets 5k, a down bet from his flop bet. Pretty weird, and John makes the call once again. I didn't really expect him to fold to a bet of that size, but I also don't really know what I like doing here. I don't think we can fold. I think it's a little bit too possible that the betting player has a hand like king queen, queen jack, and just kind of doesn't know what to do with his hand, sort of wants to set his price, and that John could have a similar hand such as king queen, even ace king himself. I also think raising is probably a little bit of an overplay because people could easily play ace queen this way. Probably not so much the betting player, but John could. So again, I make a sort of awkward call, and we go 3 ways again to the river, which is an 8 of hearts, effectively a brick. And when I check, the big blind bets 5k again. So just astonishingly small bet. John makes the call again, and I'm actually left with a little bit of a conundrum here, because while my hand definitely rates to be good some of the time, I don't think we can ever fold. It also is going to chop pretty frequently, I think, with John at this point. So I definitely had the thought of maybe I can check raise here. Maybe I can get everybody off of likely 1-pair holdings. Like, it's just so unlikely that John never puts in a raise with ace queen. It's so unlikely this rec player has ace queen. And yet we could play ace queen exactly like this. I think the most credibly anyway. So it crossed my mind briefly, but in the end, the price was just so good. I felt like calling had to be good, and I didn't know for sure if raising was good. So I make the call. The big blind has king queen, which is pretty much in line with what I was thinking. And John actually has pocket jack, so never puts in the raise. I kind of understand his hesitancy here when, again, I could very easily have ace queen. I could have pocket kings. So I guess I sort of lost the minimum there. Lost, what, 17k after the flop in kind of a cooler situation, but just the nature of the board made me play pretty cautious. In this next hand, we are at the 300, 500, 500 level with 170k, and we're actually now up to 7-handed, so I was wrong. we got a few more people a bit quicker than I thought. I opened 10-8 of spades and the hijack to 2k. The button and the big blind both call, and the flop comes down 7-5-4 rainbow. I have a gutter, don't think it's a mandatory bet, but I do decide to c-bet here 3k, and both of them call. The turn is the 4 of diamonds, not really a good card for us to keep betting on. The big blind checks, I check, and the button bets 9k. The big blind tanks like forever, like 3 hours, and folds. And during this time, I just sort of feel like I pick up on the button that he's not the strongest. Maybe he's got a hand like pocket sixes. Maybe he's got a very weak 7. But I don't think he ever has better than like pocket 9s. I don't think he ever has a 4. So I think for a bit and I decide to turn this hand into a bluff. I mean, it's 2 overs and a gutter, so it's a bluff. I go ahead and check raise to 27k, and he folds fairly quickly. Next hand, blinds are 300, 600, 600. I've got 205k in my stack now. Open ace-jack offsuit in middle position to 2.2k, and only the big blind, who is a pretty active player, makes the call. Flop comes down, top 2 for us, ace-jack deuce, and he checks. I bet 3.2k, he makes the call. Go heads up to a turn, which is an 8. He checks again, and when I bet 7.5k, he calls again. So this is a pretty good development thus far. The river's a 3 of clubs, which unfortunately brings in a flush. He kind of sighs and like goes for a bet, but I felt like it was a very deliberate sigh. It wasn't one of these sort of things where the guy is like semi-acting, but it's like subconscious. He goes ahead and bets 17k, and I honestly felt like there were going to be times where he improved on the river and goes for a bet, like he has ace 3. Who knows what else. I just didn't feel like this was going to be a flush that often based on what I knew about him and just based on how many hands he was really playing. So I make the call. He shows us jack 3 offsuit, and I felt very fortunate that I had ace jack and not like ace king, because I think I may have still called with ace king. But we take down another hand here. Next hand, same blind level, 250k in the stack. Open pocket 9s to 2.2k in middle position. And the hijack, the button, and the big blind all call. So 4 ways to a flop of 8, 7 deuce. I decide to put a small c-bet out there of 3k. And the hijack calls. The button now makes it 13k. I go super back and forth on this because I think that it's a stage of the tournament and it's a board texture on which people are going to play pretty straight up. And even though this check raise doesn't seem like it should represent a lot of value hands, I do think that people do this with sets. I do think that people do this with 2-pair. And certainly with multiple players in the hand, those hands are definitely out there. So I'm not happy about it, but I choose to peel 1, planning to evaluate later streets. And we end up going heads up to the turn. The turn is a 4 of clubs. I check, and he now bets 25k, leaving himself just 25k behind. The turn is also not a very good card because 5-6 actually comes in, and that was one of the few straight draws that kind of makes a lot of sense. I do decide to just let it go. He doesn't show us what he had, but I feel pretty good about it. Kind of unsure how I feel about the flop since pocket 9s, I block a lot of the straight draws as well. The next hand is at 400, 800, 800, 250k in the stack, and we're finally up to a full table of 8 players. Early position, who's a pretty active player, makes it 2k, and I make it 7.5k in the hijack with pocket jacks. He makes the call, so we go heads up to a flop of king 6 deuce 2-tone. He checks. I decide to go for a c-bet here of 6.5k, and he shoves for 20k. Not a super fun spot, but there's a lot out there as far as draws go. I felt that because this player was so active, he would have many flush draws, and he wouldn't necessarily just auto check jam like any king here for value. So I do make the call, and he actually has ace 5 of diamonds. So we're in good shape, but not great shape. The turn is a 3 of hearts, and the river is a 5 of hearts. So we managed to hold, stack a player, and chip up once again. Surprise, surprise. The next hand, we're at 500, 1K, 1K, 270K in the stack. Sort of crazy to have moved this many levels up and still have basically 300 big blinds, but it's a good tournament. We're running good. I feel like we're playing pretty good too, so what are you going to do? I open pocket sevens under the gun to 2.5K. Middle position, the cutoff, the button, the small blind, the big blind, and somebody from another table all call. The flop comes out 7-5-3. We just have top set again. I don't know. It's like I don't even know what's going on right now, but we have top set. Checks to me. I decide to put out a bet of 10K. Don't really want to make this cheap to people. Even though it's not a flush draw board, it's a fairly coordinated board. And in multi-way pots like this, it's very easy. Someone has a pair and a gutter. Somebody else could have a set. Somebody else could have 2 pair. So definitely want to start getting some action in now. Middle position, the button, and the small blind. And I'm pretty sure the guy from the other table all call. Pretty crazy. The big blind then makes it 35K with 80K behind. Interesting development. At first glance, this seems pretty awesome, right? We have top set. We beat some hands that he could value bet. I was a little bit worried specifically because it was the big blind, and I thought the big blind might have every straight possible. Like they might play every 6-4 offsuit. But at the end of the day, this hand's just way too strong. We get to cooler a lot of his hands. And who knows? Maybe some people are capable of making a semi-bluff here once in a while with a pair and a straight draw or something like that. So I just decide to shove because everybody else has about 60 to 100K, and I cover everybody. So folds back around to the big blind. He seems to already know what I have and what the outcome is going to be, but he does make the call and shows us the good news with pocket threes. Turn is an 8, river's a 9. It's hard to not fade that one out, but we manage. We manage it as expected and stack that player, chipping up to over 400K. This next hand is the 600, 1200, 1200 level. We have 450K in the stack, back to 7-handed, thanks to yours truly. Under the gun makes it 3K. The small line calls, and I'm in the big blind with King 10 offsuit, and I decide to overcall. Not a super mandatory overcall, but I think it's pretty standard. The flop comes out King 4-4 rainbow. I check. Under the gun player bets 3K, and I decide to make the call. Heads up to the turn, which is the 3 of spades. I check, and he now checks it behind. The river's a jack, so my kicker does not actually play, and I think I make a bit of a mistake here when I go ahead and lead out for 11K. I think it's just a little bit far-fetched to think he has queens played this way and is going to call. He doesn't really ever have a 4, but I'm chopping if he ever somehow has a worse king. And I think it's pretty easy for him to play ace, king, king, queen, king, jack this way. So I think it's a bit of a mistake, but I do make the bet, and he decides to just call with king, jack. So, we don't quite lose the minimum, but I'm also not too upset with how this went. This next hand, we've got 500K, 1.5K, 2.5K, 2.5K levels, so it's a couple levels later. I've definitely cooled down as far as the hands I'm getting and the outcomes of the hands. But middle position makes it 6K. Hijack calls. I'm in the cutoff with pocket kings, and I make it 26K. Folds through the blinds, and middle position and the hijack both call. The flop comes out 8-7-6, and it checks to me. Not a super fun board, and we could certainly check here, but I decide to put out a bet of 30K. Middle position goes ahead and check jams for 170K. This is super scary. This is a really scary spot because I felt like this player was pretty competent. I didn't think they would overplay something like 10s or jacks, and while I thought they might turn 9s into a bluff, that was really the only thing that I could think of myself as beating. And super random other bluffs like 9-8 suited, where like I think that he would just call. Same with pocket 9s. It's like he has to really decide to just go for it. And I thought that was going to be pretty unlikely. So I did something that I do super infrequently. And I made a pretty big fold on the flop with an overpair. He later tells me that he had pocket queens. So I didn't really think he would even have pocket queens because of the pre-flop action. I thought he would 4-bet that. And it kind of makes sense if he doesn't 4-bet it, that that's a hand he's willing to play that fast, even if he wouldn't play 10s that fast, because it is, it beats more of my range. So even though I didn't think he'd overplay jacks and 10s, and I thought it would be like mostly slow played aces and sets and a couple combos of pocket 9s, even though he tells me he had queens, I don't think I hate my play. I haven't done all the combo work. This might, if he has pocket queens in his range, this might turn out to be a call. And certainly this is an exploitative fold on my part. But all in all, not too unhappy with that decision, and ultimately was able to, obviously bag a pretty great stack coming out of the end of day one. Remember, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Share this video with a friend and leave me a comment letting me know what you thought. I'll see you in the day 2 video.